This is Tommy's Outdoors 39, and our guest today is Fiola Foley. Fiola has been a professional athlete. She worked as a race organizer, and she spent time working for BMC Switzerland. That's bike racing for you. Currently, she's a communications and PR person at Komoot. Komoot, if you don't know, is an outdoors app that you can use for planning your routes, for cycling and running and hiking. It's quite good, actually, and we talk about it a little bit, but that episode is not about Komoot. What that episode is about cycling industry, and how we enjoying outdoors while cycling. And speaking about enjoyment, Fiola is actually one of those people who are enjoying her job. Imagine that, right? If you're not enjoying your job, you're doing something wrong. So Fiola definitely is doing everything right because she enjoys her job. And as we know, if you love your work, you never feel like working. So definitely very, very interesting to hear from Fiola, especially if you don't like your job. Maybe you can pick up some tips what to do to change that. So without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Fiola Foley. With us today, Fiola Foley. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you, Tommy?
Very good. Thanks for accepting invitation. I know you're very, very busy.
Yeah, it's hilarious.
and we're supposed to record that podcast like a couple months ago, last year, in fact, but it's just never worked out. I think you were traveling somewhere, and we never missed the time, but you were actually we were talking earlier on the phone. You were actually a requested guest. I had a few people contacting me and say, you should get the Fiola on the podcast.
You should never believe them, whatever they say.
No, I think they're right. I think they're right because you said I don't remember where I read that, but you said that you love your job because your job is your lifestyle, and it's related to outdoors. So come on, that's outdoors podcast right here.
Exactly. I guess I'm one of the few people that can say that they love their job and their job is in the outdoors, because I know that some people do work in the outdoor industry and there's things that don't really match up. Maybe they don't make a lot of money, or they get tired of guiding people, or they get older, but I'm pretty happy with my lot, let's say.
I heard that like 70% of people don't like their job, or maybe hate their job.
I can just be very grateful that
what are they doing?
Yeah. I guess I don't know. I can get all philosophical about this, but I probably won't on this podcast.
Please do. Yeah. Please do get philosophical.
Sometimes I think I've just been very lucky, but then I did put in quite a lot of effort and time, not working in jobs that I didn't like, but really working hard, I suppose, to get myself to the position where I could score or land a job like this.
Yes.
So it was a bit of a graft sometimes.
It's never given, right?
Yeah.
Very seldom.
Yeah, you have to make the right choices, and you have to persevere and be patient and talk to the right people and put yourself out there.
Was that something that you set out to do? Was that the goal that you said, I want to get a job that will, that will not feel like a job?
I guess I've been very lucky. Like I said, I was teaching for a while. I was at primary school teaching until I quit rowing when I was 25 because I was sort of full-time athlete for a while. And then I taught until I was 30. And then due to an event that I was working on, I changed tack completely because the event I was working on was an outdoor event. And I thought, I don't know if I want to do my master's in education. I think I'd rather do it in PR, event PR, or PR in general. So I did a postgrad in new communication and media. And then I ended up leaving Ireland again that year because it was very hard to get jobs. The recession had started. And then I went to Zurich, and I ended up working in luxury consumer goods. And it was a really, really amazing company. It was Swarovski, one of the bigger, like...
Was there the optics division?
I was in the consumer goods division.
Okay, so it's not... So optics is not consumer.
No, in their business, there's about 7 or 8 departments or
Okay.
businesses within the Swarovski sort of canopy, I suppose,
Yeah.
or portfolio. And the consumer goods business is all of the jewellery and the figurines and lighting and the stuff that goes into houses like vases and things like that.
I thought that the binoculars and scopes and stuff
That's
like
only
that.
one of 6 businesses.
Yeah, but I thought it's going to be in this kind of consumer part.
No, it's managed. I think that's managed out of Tyrol in Austria.
Okay.
But then when I worked for Swarovski, I was very fortunate to amass quite some experience in a bigger company, marketing and social media. That's what I was doing. But I had it in my head for quite clearly that I wanted to work in the bike industry or in the sports industry or in the outdoor industry. So I was like really scouring the whole time, looking for opportunities, interviewing, and then eventually I got given a break, which was at BMC Switzerland, which is one of the top 10 bike brands, I suppose, globally. And there, you know, I really put in the time and made my way up through the company until I was head of global communications and managing a team there and all of the global communications. I suppose the job description is pretty self-explanatory.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, and so you were not involved in a, you know, like a cycling and bicycle part of it. It was more of a communication and stuff.
Involved in the cycling.
Oh, you were on the events, during events, like when the BMC. Did they have like a racing team? Or did they had
4 racing teams.
Okay, so you were with those teams and
the job was, so I had it was multifaceted. I was the liaison for the teams. So generally when we launched a new product and we wanted the riders to sort of help us to market the product, I would deliver a lot of the messages behind the bike and what that bike does and why it's different and how it's going to help you perform. So I would go to the team camps.
So you were responsible for making all those lads to go and buy BMC bike, and all those people who are like, no, BMC is the best bike in the world. That's your fault or your
it's quite it was one small part of the job, let's put it that way. So basically forming and delivering the message around the bikes and coordinating all the translations, all the content that went out in social media, how we wanted the teams to market the bikes, make sure that they said the right things about the bike, all the way to, so it was like retailer and consumer
making sure
team.
So I have to that make sure they say the right thing about the bike. So were they like not allowed to say bad things about the bike?
It's not about bad or good things. It was more about the qualities. What do we want the general public? So is this bike about cornering? Is it because it's light going uphill, or is it a bike for a sprinter, or is it a bike for an endurance rider? So they had to basically explain like what the philosophy behind that particular bike is, and know that when someone asks a question about the technology of the bike, they would have to know what it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you had to explain that to them. I always thought that they would know.
No.
That the guy knows, like, I'm a sprinter, right? So the bike I have is for sprinters. That, you know.
There's a lot more to it than that, like where the stiffness is on the bike, whether it's focused on the bottom bracket or whether it's more on the front or the rear. There's a lot going into bike technology, a lot more than I think a lot of people that aren't really tuned into the whole scene. I would love
just dive into that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting.
I was always wondering about the brake calipers and some, I think on the Time Machine, the brake calipers at the bottom of the triangle.
They're integrated,
And why is that? It's
aerodynamics.
But it's very prone to like getting all the gunk and mud in it.
It wouldn't matter if you're really focused on time trialing, then you'd be cleaning your bike after every time trial session, I suppose, because typically a time trialer doesn't ride that bike the whole time.
Yeah.
It's just coming out when they really want to nail a time.
Sure. So it didn't matter at all.
No, sometimes they're not the most practical, but it's not. A lot of bikes at that level aren't aimed at practicality. It's more about breaking records and Yeah.
So in other words, that the cyclist who's bringing bike time machine onto Saturday cycle with a group didn't get your message and got the wrong bike, because
think
it's clearly shouldn't be using it in that.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but if anyone turns up on a group ride with aero bars, I think that they should probably stay at the back of the group, because I think those bikes aren't super.
It actually didn't have aero bars. It had like a normal drop bar.
Oh, it was a road.
But it was called Time Machine.
There's two time machines. There's a TT bike with the aero bars, which is like, the aero bike or the time trial bike. And then there's a Time Machine Road, which is like...
Oh, so that had to be this
That would
one.
be like the sprinter's bike. And that also has integrated rear brakes in the rear triangle.
All fine. So we cleared that out.
Yeah.
All fine.
It's like a sparring session on bike technology.
No, I'm really interested in all this. I watched the video. It was some other brand of bikes where they were explaining how the carbon is layered in that direction and another direction, because it has to be stiff. It has to be stiff here and not stiff there, and kind of absorb the vibration that way. And it was like, wow, it's like the whole engineering.
It's interesting, because since I've moved home to Ireland, Switzerland, it's a country where the GDP is quite high. People have a lot of disposable income. A lot of people are into endurance sports already. So spending like €6,000 on a bike is like normal. 4,000 people wouldn't really question it. It's kind of like, if you really want to ride bikes, whether it's mountain bike or road, investing €4,000 in your equipment is like normal, right? Yeah. And I wouldn't know if they really, invest a lot of time researching the technology behind the bike, but they do appreciate the aesthetics. Swiss design, it's famous, so they know when they look at a bike, okay, this is a really nice bike. And Ireland, I feel like we're getting there, but we're not quite there, because for a lot of people, to invest that amount of money in a piece of equipment means that you must be very serious, and taking triathlon to the next level, and you're training 15-20 hours a week. So we still have to get there, but it's nice to see that in some of the groups that I'm riding in now, they are investing a bit more money in their equipment, and I think it's it's nice to do that, because you get so much back from your sport. It's nice to ride good bikes if that's what you enjoy as well.
So I have two questions. You were responsible for all the communication and kind of marketing around this. Not marketing, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. It was more like it was an element of the marketing, right? The message about what the bike is and so on. So my question, I'm wondering, was the fact that the equipment was quite expensive impacted your job in a way, like how you need to change the message, for example, for the markets like Ireland, where people are not likely to buy such expensive equipment? Or was it like, no, it's just not our target audience and we don't care about them and we just... the
messaging stays the same. What's different is we would have, let's say, we would have like 6 or 7, most bike brands will have what we would call, I don't know, maybe 8 bikes, 10 bikes. And then within those bikes, the families of those bikes, you have different price points, they're called in the cycling industry, in the bike industry.
Oh, okay,
and then you would start to tweak the message. So the bike has the main bike is on a pedestal, like that's your, like the T-Machine SLR 01 or the Road Machine 01, or the Time Machine 01 or whatever, Trail Fox, Speed Fox, all those bikes. They'll have one model that's like all out, the best components. It'll come with, like, if it's a road bike, it'll have Dura Ace Di2, and then the next one will be Ultegra Di2, and then you'll have like maybe 4 component options for that particular amazing bike. But then below that, then you'll have another bike within that family, which will be the O2 or the O3, and they call it different names depending on the bike brand, and the price will be less for that O2 model or O2 group of bikes and the O3 group of bikes, and that's reduced in price because of the componentry, but also because of the carbon layup. So they'll use lower grade carbon, or they'll layer it in different parts of the bike, so they can cut costs, I suppose, with the production. And then maybe some countries will only be delivered like 5 of those top level bikes, and they might get 50 of the next level of bikes because the market wouldn't be able to afford or purchase.
Tell me about it. When I was trying to buy the bike, I look at the catalog, I wanted this one, and then it was like hell to get it because like no, you need to wait like 8 months because it has to go from the United States somewhere to main reseller, and then main reseller will send it like, oh god.
Yeah, it's interesting because as consumers get really used to like getting what they want, they expect the same from industries like the bike industry, which doesn't operate. So let's say the processes are different there, the timelines are different. Really? Yeah, everything's coming out of...
that's very interesting because like I said, I was kind of like crushed against that particular problem. But I was more thinking that this is because of the specificity of Ireland, like you said, that there's like people are more inclined to buy what's in the shop rather than, here's a guy rolls in and says like, oh, I want this bike, this model, and this like we don't have it. Sure, you're a reseller of your BMC or Trek or Specialized, whatever. Like, no, it's like...
There's basically like a prediction phase that happens with the sales teams from in the company, and they'll say, okay, I think that my market will buy this amount of bikes, and then those sales guys are put under pressure to make sure that the dealers will buy the bikes. And then the dealers are under pressure because they then have to sell the bikes and then at the price range and not at discount. And then they start to discount them to get rid of the stock before the next year
because the next year comes in. Yeah.
So and also like the bike assembly is also a very tricky phase because so like a lot of factories will prioritize bigger brands because they know that they're the clients that they need to look out for. So smaller brands really suffer.
Oh, so now what you're saying is that there's a factory that puts together bikes for various brands.
There's factories that produce the bikes and they assemble them as well. So they'll basically do everything in the one place and then they'll package and ship.
Yeah. But what I mean is like there's a one factory. In that factory, they're putting together and manufacturing and assembling, BMC bikes and Trek bikes and Merida bikes and whatever else brand bikes. But there's a one factory. So it's not like each brand has its own factory.
No, I think most brands are using the same factories in Taiwan. So they'll be sharing, and some factories specialize in certain things. Like there's one factory that, for example, you would produce a bike like the Time Machine or the Team Elite because they are really good at lightweight carbon layup and they're specialists in that and they have the technology for it. Whereas you might produce the Team Elite 02 in a different factory because they'll be better at like carbon layup distribution in different areas of the bike. They wouldn't have the technology to be able to do the really like high level stuff. And then you'll have different brands using different factories for different bikes depending on what the factory strength is. And then sometimes those bikes, there was one particular brand I remember hearing saved 13 million euros by shipping all the bikes from Taiwan to I can't remember where it was now, Vietnam I think, to have the bikes assembled in Vietnam. Which is also interesting because if you think of like the logistics of gathering all the bikes from Taiwan and then moving all the bikes to Vietnam into the jungle where there's cheaper labor, getting them assembled there, taking them back out of that location and then putting them on a boat to be distributed to their different centres. It's quite interesting, but that's kind of how it's working.
So I think you already answered that, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So is it true, or maybe how much is it true statement that sometimes you hear, like say, like, oh, like Giant does all so they have a factory, so all the bikes are made there, so I might as well buy a Giant bike because it's all the same.
Giant's an exception. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So Giant actually owns a lot of the factories.
Yeah, exactly. So you confirm that. So how much this is true? Is it like, well,
it's not Giant, it's a syndicate, I think. Yeah.
So is it is it any difference? You might as well buy a Giant bike because it's the same factory.
No,
anyway.
because it's up to Giant to design the bike. I mean,
yeah.
the factory the factory follows instructions based on the product, the design team at the brand.
Mm-hmm.
And if the design and technology isn't up to scratch, then you'll get a bike that's not up to scratch or not as good as another brand.
And is the quality process and the production process also kind of imposed by the brand?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's pretty stringent because it has to meet certain standards usually, like that the UCI is one of the standards. And then second, if stuff breaks, then it's obviously really bad for the brand. You know, it does happen because, nothing's perfect. And sometimes there's like a factory defect or maybe there's something that the product designers overlooked. And there has to be recalls. I mean, it's normal after stress testing. But hopefully, generally it doesn't happen that often. Yeah.
That was very interesting. I didn't expect that to dive that deep into the bike manufacturing, but
I've been out of it for like, I guess, a year and a half or 2 years now. But yeah, it's interesting. I'm involved in another project, which is related to increasing the awareness around the environmental impact of the bike industry.
Oh.
That's probably a more interesting topic than what goes on in the bike industry.
It's equally interesting, please. But it's very kind of like a now popular subject about environmental impacts and all that. So please lay it out for us.
Yeah. So I guess through the time that I spent working for BMC Switzerland, I made quite a few, obviously, contacts in the industry and with the press and then with just people I became friends with. And one of them is a woman called Leanne van Leuven. She's Dutch and she works in food sustainability, but she's an excellent photographer and she writes very nicely and she's new enough to cycling, but she was really shocked when she started talking to friends of hers in the industry about topics related to bikes and where they come from and what the carbon footprint is on shipping bikes all the way from like Asia to Europe or to the States, and how come there isn't a selection of like sustainable apparel there for cyclists that might want to buy lycra that's made from recycled plastic like you have in the surf industry, for example, or in ski and snow sports. So it was really bugging her, I think, for about a year. And then she was like, I'm going to do something about this. So she gathered together, I think there's 6 of us or 5 or 6 of us in this group. She asked me to help her with the PR and communication side of it and to network as well. To come up with it's like a platform that we have to connect people within the industry and the community to share ideas and look at ways that we can impact and transmit the message that we need to do something, because currently there's no standard, there's no solution, right? Because what happens?
No standard for what?
There's no solution for the biggest. I think one of the biggest topics is most of the bikes that people are purchasing are made of carbon. Carbon is not recyclable. The carbon that you get in the form of a bike frame, because it's been treated with epoxy. Carbon essentially is recyclable or can be reused. But the carbon tubes that have been treated with epoxy, you first have to strip the epoxy, which is a very time-consuming process, and it's actually damaging anyway from a chemical perspective. So we have a lot of situations where there's brands out there stockpiling either warranty bikes or bikes that have been returned to them from dealers because they're broken or they've reached their sell-by date, and they're in factories, but there's no solution for doing anything with this carbon. So that's one of the bigger topics. And until
what's
someone
happening
comes
currently with those bikes?
They're just in factories. They're in storage. Like there's one particular brand.
I thought
that
you're gonna say they ended up in the landfill and then in the ocean or something.
Some of the brands,
like that. It's not that bad if they're in factory. I mean,
yeah. Landfill is not a solution either because the carbon doesn't decompose. So yeah, some brands are very, they're like, they do have someone in charge of sustainability within the companies, and I think that it weighs heavily on their minds, let's say, and they're just waiting for a solution and to see what they can do with all these bikes. I have a
solution: make steel bikes again.
That's one of the topics that we have addressed, or we will be addressing. We started these clunker rides. Where we different friends of ours organized rides in cities in Europe, and the bike that you were to ride shouldn't be more than 5 years old, or less than 5 years old rather. Yeah. So just highlighting the fact that you don't need to always have the shiny, bright new stuff. That you know, I guess part of the job of this group is to have conversations with people that are producing locally, or they're local bike builders, or they're making components from sustainable methods, or they're making apparel from recycled goods.
Have you heard about this initiative called the Rebike?
No.
I had it on a podcast. There's a guy who's this is like a social enterprise. He's running that in Dungarvan in County Watford.
Yeah.
I think it's called a rebuy cafe. And he gathers like old bikes, broken bikes, or like, you know, kids grew up and they're just not using this. So all those bikes that would otherwise ended up somewhere in the trash, he gathers all them and he fixes them, you know, repairs and whatever, and then donates to schools, to people in need. It's like, I have him on the podcast. I you know, and we walk into his cafe and you see like a old, what was it? Was it, not Cinelli bike, the bike which is like a classic color, like a blue green. What's the? I don't remember the brand now. Like very like classic Italian brand of the bike. Bianchi, and it was like a steel bike, like an old one with the shifters on the down tube.
Yeah.
But with a carbon wheels and like a vintage. There's a name like a new vintage or something.
There's a ton of amazing social initiatives. Like even I was in Morocco a couple of weeks ago, and there's a Dutch couple bringing bikes from Holland, and not just distributing them. They're focusing a lot on women, because women in Muslim countries aren't allowed to drive, so they think this is a really good way to facilitate them to move around. But they're also training mechanics, because they're seeing cycling is becoming very popular in Morocco, in the mountains and stuff. However, our sort of focus is a little bit more on the industry and the community.
Right.
So educating the community to say, hey guys, did you realize that like your investments, you're pumping money into this carbon industry, and the bikes that you're riding, which is are not sustainable or are not recyclable. So it's not that we want to, you know, we don't want to like negatively impact the bike industry, but we also just want people to be aware of this topic, and also look for, maybe just not buy that bike every 2 years. Maybe try and keep the carbon frame that they have and just replace the components. And if they are going to replace the components, look to Chris King, for example, who's one of his philosophies is to have sustainable component production. Like make those choices. So one is being informed about what the choices are, or the options that you have are. Being more conscientious, not replacing that bike every year with a new carbon bike, and just, I suppose, coming together as a collective group, and maybe even, trying to look for solutions together, because there are a lot of people out there doing things, but we don't know about them because they're out on their own. Yeah. So it's more about bringing people together so that we can have that conversation and we can support each other to find solutions that aren't currently there.
Yeah, you should contact this guy in Watford, because it seems like a kind of similar. But you know what you're saying? It's like I said, it's a very, very popular subject right now. But I think that the replacing bike every 2 years has nothing to do with the components of the bike. It's nothing to do with it's like the bike is morally old. All the lads have to see I have a new bike.
Yeah, totally.
It doesn't, like, bikes can run, like my friend who, again, I have him on the podcast. He cycled through Sahara Desert on a fat bike, believe it or not, and he done that because he was going fishing in Sahara Desert from all the places. So he cycled there, and he has a marine bike, and he said, like, my parents gave me that bike when I was 17 or 16.
I had a call with the brand manager of Marin yesterday, actually.
Yeah, and it's like, it's a great bike. It's he's still so that's I think that a lot of people see that.
Well, I mean, there's different people do different things with bikes. I mean, there are riders that are very into their performance cycling, and I suppose, it's not for me to say that they shouldn't buy a bike every 2 years, but maybe they can look at ways to offset it if they're conscious of what the carbon footprint is of purchasing that bike. Maybe they can try and offset it in other ways, but just to be more conscious, just to even know that like there is an impact when you buy that bike, and to be aware of what the environmental impact of that purchase is, because no one has been talking about it until now.
Yeah. You know what? That's interesting, because there's a lot of talk about like impact and sustainability in every area almost. And I think like the problem is like because we have so many people who are buying this stuff, right? Is like I am not sure, like, is this the solution? And I'm like, I don't have better solution. But I think consumer like this is and this is a good thing, because we live better, we can afford that our life.
We've never had it better.
Exactly, we never had it better. So it's like I don't know, because it seems like the initiative, like you're saying, it's I applaud it, but it feels like a drop in the ocean. Do you think it's like years and years and years of work like that before we see the impact, or you think like, no, it's actually not, next decade, it's like
it has to start somewhere.
And but do you have this like like a vision of dealing with something so overwhelmingly big that sometimes you go like, oh, this just doesn't make sense?
It's not a reason not to do it. It's not a big enough reason not to do it. I think that with the group in working on the projects, we've enough influence that the message will get to people. And through the events that we're doing, we're going to be doing these like cleanups on some of the big alpine passes in Europe this summer, together with the clunkers rides. We're doing some gear swaps.
I like the clunker ride.
We're doing some gear swaps as well. They're the community events, and we're interviewing bike manufacturers or component manufacturers or apparel people that are conscious of this topic, to see how they do it. And it's not our job to change the world. It's our job to make people aware, or we feel it's our job to help to make people aware that there is this problem.
That's a good start. And then it doesn't seem like an unachievable goal. It seems like a quite attainable.
Yeah, I mean, we've only been sort of working on this since about, I guess, a year. It's only really gathered a bit of momentum in the last 4 months, since Leanne had more time to work on it. But like typically I would love, I don't know if Leanne is together with me on this, but I would love to see, in the same way you have like a standard on the quality of bikes, like quality control of bikes, like from the UCI, or I'd love to see something similar for either like similar to fair trade or sustainability or environmentally friendly. Yes, whatever. That sticker that says you're buying a product that has, one, the workers that have been producing this product have been treated fairly, and two, the bike has been made somehow carbon footprint neutral. At the moment, compared to other industries, the bike industry is very far behind.
Really?
I'll probably never get a job in the bike industry again after this podcast. But like they know it, like, but it's just not easy. And it's not, the weight isn't on the bike industry's shoulders. It's just really, really difficult to come up with a commercial solution for this. Because that's how it's working at the moment. I don't expect Trek to say we're not going to produce any more carbon bikes, we're going to just make steel bikes. I mean, that's just not going to happen. So it's a matter of supporting the industry to look for solutions by connecting them with people and experts, and just seeing what's possible, It's surprising because like bikes are usually seen as a kind of eco-friendly and environmentally friendly cycling
way. Yes, cycling. But the bikes are kind of like a part of that, and here you are saying like, no, that industry is far behind.
Yeah, it is, but I'm not talking about
somebody's listening to that podcast and goes like, oh no.
Let's just keep them separate, because obviously the bike as a method of transport is highly sustainable. I mean, the bike has been probably the best invention of mankind. It's given freedom to so many people to move around without needing to use fuel. A bike can last forever if you take care of it. It's such a simple machine.
Bike can change a life.
Yeah, totally. I mean, like, let's not stop cycling, but let's look at what we're using to cycle, and see, is there a way that we can
you're
improve?
right. That's important. Come on, guys.
Yeah.
Cycling is okay.
Cycling's amazing.
Cycling is okay. Just what you said. Just
clunker
rides.
I'm not sure if I would agree with you, or if I would have agreed with that on Monday evening, because I had a ride out with the social leisure group from the Killarney Cycling Club, who are amazing, by the way. I'm going to give them a bit of a plug here on the podcast. Yeah, there's a group of very passionate riders that get together mostly Mondays, maybe Wednesdays or Thursdays, and every weekend. And on the weeknights, they ride from Killarney town up to the top of Moll's Gap, beyond Moll's Gap actually, and then back down again in the dark.
Wow.
And on Monday night last, I was like, grand, I'm going to turn up. And my road bike, I needed to change a brake cable. So I took my gravel bike, which has got 42mm tires in it. But I was like, oh, I'll be fine. The average speed up and down was 26 kilometers an hour. And that's 810 meters of elevation gain. Yeah. So it was pretty quick.
What's the name of that group again?
It's just Killarney Cycling Club.
Oh, it's Killarney Cycling Club.
Yeah. But there's a couple of sort of fractions within the club. You've got like obviously the more competitive riders that are sort of doing their own thing, performance related. And then you've got the mountain bikers who are also really, really amazing. I mean, the work that they've been doing to, maintain trails and to bring the youth on, and it's a fantastic club.
That's a part of mountain biking, right? To maintain the trail, build trails and build all that. Are there any good trails in Killarney, like in the area?
Second topic that I'm very passionate about, I suppose.
Oh, very good. Please.
I was like rolling my eyes.
Because
access.
I tell you what. This is how I got into the road cycling, because I was I started as a mountain biker and I was cycling on the mountain bike.
Yeah.
But then, at the time, the only solution for me was to put the bike on the back of my car and drive to Ballyhoura.
Yeah.
And cycle there. And then I had a surgery on the knee, and then the doctor said, like, well, cycling is a great way of, kind of rehabbing. And so, like, okay, I have my mountain bike. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put like a tires, like a road tires on it and cycle. And then I said, like, well, actually, I might as well buy a road bike, and because it's so much more accessible. You just
leave from home.
You can leave from home and come back, rather than So obviously there are folks who live somewhere close to the trail or close to the nice area when they have this sort of access on the mountain bike. But in general, that can be an issue. So please tell.
It's a tough one in Ireland because I guess it's me as well. I mean, I was fortunate to live in Switzerland for 8 years. And no matter where I lived, I had trails on my doorstep. And it's one of the things I absolutely miss the most about living in Ireland. I think my mountain bike has suffered since I moved home. One, because to get to like good quality trails, and when I'm talking about good quality trails, they're not always natural trails. So you need a community of riders that are building the trails, maintaining them, and creating new trails. I might have to put the bike into the car and drive to Killarney, because luckily enough there we've got some amazing individuals that are constantly working on the trails around Torque, which are for me some of the best trails in the country. And then apart from that, outside of Kerry, you've got to go to Ballyhoura or Bike Park Ireland up in, I think it's Tipperary. Or then go up to Dublin, and on Dublin then you've got like Ballinstoe and Joust and a whole bunch of really really great like areas to ride your bike there. One of the bigger topics here is trail access. Officially in Kerry, correct me if I'm wrong, or actually if someone could comment on this podcast and clarify, I'd be very appreciative. There are no official mountain biking trails. There are riders riding on trails with the permission of the landowner, like just actually approaching the farmer and saying, hey, do you mind if I ride across your property today? And the farmer says yes or no or whatever. And then some landowners, they don't mind because the riders are walking on what are like official walking trails. But those walking trails are often prohibiting mountain bikers and horse riders and even people walking with dogs. So we are pretty limited in Kerry. It's really unfortunate. And sometimes I really feel like the recreational users or the wishes of all recreational users is not being taken into account. Definitely walkers are being prioritised. You know, I guess people think that walkers have lower impact on trails than mountain bikers, or for some reason
it's more accessible. You don't have to spend €4,000 on a mountain bike.
Yeah, there's probably more walkers out there, but in terms of like trail erosion and those topics, you know, there's been studies done which show that mountain bikers versus walkers, there's often not a huge difference when it comes to trail erosion, unless you're dealing with like alpine trails where there's a, you know, gravity is being taken into account. But if you have, given the amount of people that are riding mountain bikes in Kerry versus the ones that are people that are walking, it's probably never going to be more than 15% bikers. You know, even if the sport explodes within the next 5 to 10 years, you'll probably have maybe still like a 70 to 30% ratio, 70% being walkers, 30% being bikers. So I don't see the trail erosion topic being a very valid one. It's just a matter of mountain bikers getting together and as a group and, you know, lobbying a little bit for.
That's always a problem. You know, I think especially in the outdoor space, when you're, because that's something that's quite repeatable. You know, if you take the anglers and you take a hunters and you take a mountain bikers, like if only these people got together and try to, like you said, lobby for something, they will be so much more powerful. But the problem is like they're like either don't know or they don't care or they kind of like. I think
it has to get to a point where they feel like, you know, the situation is bad enough that they have to do something about it. Now there are some groups in Ireland. I think that the mountain bikers in Wicklow have been very successful in creating sort of a situation where there's, I suppose, both like landowners are content and they're tolerable. They're tolerating the mountain bikers on their land, or it's Cuilta owned forestry.
Yeah, I was gonna ask that because have you heard about this organization that is called Keep Ireland Open?
Yeah, I have. Yeah,
and I think this is kind of the same subject, right? Because you said like it's either farmer, but then there's seldom farmer has a farm big enough so you can have a trail within one farm. So then you need number of farmers, and then you have a Cuilta forest, and it's just mess. I think it's very, very difficult to identify the patch of land that is big enough so you can build a trail and everybody agrees, or you not end up in a situation where there's like a one guy who's in the middle of the whole thing. It's like, no, close. You can't cycle, and the whole trail is. It's
funny because in Ireland people say, "Oh, you should look at what's been done in New Zealand." "Oh, you should look at what's been done in Scotland." Or I would say, "Oh my God, like Switzerland's amazing because you have walkers and cyclists sharing trails and stuff." They're the wrong examples because, like you just mentioned, there's been massive areas of land like state-owned land where the state has said, this is how we want this land to be run. We want to have like the freedom to roam, like in Scotland, or we want to have all of our Wanderweg, like trails, which is like Wanderway, I suppose in English. We want to allow walkers and cyclists unanimously share the trail, and the same in New Zealand. But Ireland's not like that. And historically, I mean, people in Ireland, they want to own land. It's, you know, we've only had our land back for the last like whatever 100 years. So people are so protective of their land, and the insurance and third-party liability complications don't really help either, where, you know, people, if they get injured on the land, then they can hold the landowner liable or whatever. What we should look to more is like England, and there have been very successful groups in England lobbying for access to trails, like Open Mountain Bike, I think it's called, UK. It's mostly guys from Sheffield. And they've been lobbying a lot in Wales, but also in England for access on like bridleways and paths that have been previously just accessible to walkers, but they're now accessible to mountain bikers. So I think we should look at more models that are similar to ours in terms of the situation with land ownership, and not like aim for the pedestal, which is like Scotland or Switzerland or New Zealand. So maybe being a bit more realistic and saying, look, England is a country that is more similar to Ireland in terms of land ownership. Let's have a look and see what they were doing and what groups have been successful over there and how do they do it, and how have they come to the point where a lot of recreational users feel like their rights are being addressed or respected when it comes to the usage of trails.
It's when I'm recording those podcasts, it's very interesting because I see kind of common things related to outdoors and like land access and land management in general. It's a foundation of a lot of outdoors activities. I had a podcast as well. On the podcast, the guy who's his job title was recreational officer in Brian Fennell, I think is his name, in Wicklow. And his job is exactly kind of mediating between the landowners and make sure there is a one trail and people can do and can recreate in the outdoors, because and I'm thinking like change in the way the land is managed is really absolutely like under foundation of everything else.
You need people like this. I mean, in Scotland, I attended the Developing Mountain Biking in Scotland conference in October, which was absolutely mind-blowing how they are set up to develop trails and how they work with the landowners. So these types of recreational officers, they have them, I think they have 5 in Scotland that are working with just for mountain biking. And it's government funded, so it's a Scottish Cycling Association. But the Scots are like fanatics about mountain biking and, the outdoors. And they're really, really investing in this. And they see the value in having roles like this, where you have someone that's representing the needs of the mountain biker, but also knows what the story is with the landowner. And they act as an intermediary. We feel, I think, if we had any mountain bikers here, I think we as a whole would feel wholly unrepresented when it comes to like, this topic in Ireland. I just really hope that there's a lot of people always talk about funding and there's money going into this and there's money going into that. I'd love to see money going into like those types of roles that are people that are in between, that know both sides of the coin and that can really help, especially in Kerry, which is like, people call it like the adventure capital of Ireland. It's absolutely embarrassing that we don't have official mountain biking trails.
Yes,
so
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree, 100%. But what you said earlier, lobbying. I mean, at the level of political level, that's important as well, because I think that the folks who are just organized locally within groups and farmers and so can only go so far.
But there can also be a little switch in approach as well. I mean, if I were to be probably way too radical for a lot of people living in Kerry and working in agriculture. I mean, if you look to other countries, they're looking at ways to earn money through allowing access to their land by agro-tourism, opening up little cafes, or even like the age-old Germanic thing of selling eggs, jam, and like suasmost, which is like apple juice, as people pass through or close to their farmland. So, for example, on the new Glenbeigh to Carrauntoohil Greenway, I mean, there's opportunities there for so many small landowners to turn things around now and to like offer accommodation to people that will be cycling on this path between Glenbeigh and Carrauntoohil. I mean, people should look at these developments as an opportunity rather than impeding in their way to make money in the old sense of economy, which was farming. Yes, of course, we need farming. I mean, Ireland is one of the most food sustainable countries, I think, in Europe or in the world. Let's keep up with that. But I don't think Kerry has ever been, or at least South Kerry is never going to be a super arable patch of land because of all the mountains and everything. So let's look at a way to capitalise on these developments.
Absolutely. And when I talk to farmers, they always say like, oh, it's hard to live from the farm. It's impossible. It's like a one job and you need to have another job just to like, and what in my view is like, are you taking all the opportunities? And what you're saying is exactly the answer is no, because there's so many other opportunities than just run sheep or you just run sheep, you run cattle there and like what else? And maybe you're going to plant another interesting podcast was about all the schemes to plant the native woodlands on them, because this is exactly, there are parts of the land, people own the land, they're it's not suitable for grazing, and they have that land, and like, what am I going to do with that? Well, go and plant the native woodlands and so on and so on. So I think going to farmers and talking and just making them aware, like, hey, are you aware that you can actually make money off your land? Because there's a lot of farmers, like, again, not long ago I was talking with my friend who said, like, there's a farmer, he's like 65, he doesn't have children, or those children are not interested in farming, and over his life he purchased many patches of the land, and he has all this land, and he's like a 65-year-old guy alone with all that. What is he gonna do with this? Right? Nothing. And like, I bet you he doesn't know any of that, right? And this is the opportunity, is to go to these people and say, hey, do you know, like, if we take your land and build a trail and something?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's maybe a lack of, maybe people just haven't seen outside of Ireland and the options, I suppose. You need to be inspired a little bit, and you need to see new things and be like, oh my God, we could do that at home, kind of a thing. But two, it's also really difficult it's fear. Oh my God, can you imagine it? Like, that's what farming, and now you're gonna try something completely different, where you're gonna let people into your lovely home, which is not easy for Irish people, like, so like it's I just hope that, like, maybe slowly in the next 10-20 years that people begin to recognize these opportunities, and I don't know how it's going to happen. But.
So if someone like a mountain biker is now listening to that podcast, is like, yeah, I want to get involved, I want to do something about it, what would you recommend? What he or she should do?
I don't know if there's any, there has been talks about a group forming in Kerry that will be looking to come together, like representatives of different, not representatives of clubs, but individuals that are passionate about this topic. So I guess you can get in touch with me, and maybe I can connect you with the people that are going to be involved in this group. I don't know if it's formed yet, but I was approached about it, and
hopefully it will. If it's not, hopefully it will.
Yeah, no, I'm
because
sure it will.
It's important. I mean,
there's a whole bunch of people in Kerry that have been talking about this since I came back a year and a half ago. So I think within the next few months there will be a meeting, and if there's someone listening to this that's keen to get involved, then just get in touch with me. You can write to me at fiola@komoot.com, FIOLA@KOMOOT.com, and then I can hook you up with the people that are involved.
Listen, but we never finished. Like, we started that podcast with like, you love your job, and when we kind of like meandered and just like so you were working with BMC.
Yeah.
But was that already your kind of very good job, or you still were on a mission to get that what you wanted?
Oh, wow. It's a good question. No, I never thought that. I guess my boss is going to think that I'm being paid to say this, but I don't think I could have ever imagined being so happy in a job or in a company as I am at the moment.
So what's the company?
I work for Komoot.
Komoot.
Yeah. So Komoot's our route planning and navigation app. We're not very well known in Ireland. Partly my fault.
But you're working on it, right? You're working on it.
particularly pushing in Ireland, no. That's more of a strategic decision. I mean, Ireland, if Ireland was full of mountains and forests and a lot of people were really into hiking and mountain biking and road cycling, then maybe it would be a topic. But Komoot's really for explorers, I suppose. It's the best route planning app that's out there. It's available on iOS and Android, but also on your computer desktop. And when I say we're not focusing on Ireland, for a number of reasons, I mean, I don't want to get into them on the podcast, but we're big in Germany, Austria and Switzerland. We've got about 8 million users now in total, and we're growing pretty quickly in the UK, and now we'll be translating to Spanish and French and Italian. So we're basically growing at a very quick rate.
So how this is like a dream job in the outdoors? Because it seems like just another company that is developing their platform.
Because it's in the outdoors. So I guess for me, in terms of me as a person, I've got like a huge amount of freedom. In the role that I have, I'm managing the international PR. And of course, I get to work a lot with the cycling media, so I get to maintain all of the contacts from my old job. But I also get to travel quite a bit, and a lot of the trips involve riding my bike, which is something I love to do as well.
Fantastic.
So like last year...
Are you guys hiring by any chance?
We are actually hiring, yeah. But not everyone has the cool job that I have, I must say.
Okay. So there are also sucky jobs in the company.
No, because like, I guess... like an Android developer doesn't need to be able to ride a bike, or doesn't need to be able to talk with the press, and that's kind of what I get to do. Although this year I'll be doing probably a lot less traveling, hopefully a lot less traveling than last year, because it was a bit manic last year. But I basically, the difference between, I suppose the good thing for me about the role that I'm in now is I'm moving away from performance cycling. Which suits me, because for a long period of my life, I was very performance orientated. I was, an elite athlete in rowing, and then I did adventure racing, and I was competing with the Irish team, and then I was doing super hard like mountain triathlons, like the Inferno and the Alpinathlon, and then I raced licensed like elite road, mountain bike and track. So I was really pushing pretty hard until I was about 30, I suppose 4 or 5. And then my work started to get really busy, and then I started to pull back from performance sports, but then focus a bit more on my job.
And was it not your dream job? Like, it seems like I know that there's a lot of people who listening to that is like, gee, this is like a dream job, like a performance athlete doing these crazy races and all that.
I've never been a fan of professional sports. Even when I was racing.
Really?
I love to race because, and it's a funny thing because people are like, you're so competitive. I love to push myself. I don't really care. I mean, it's nice that I was good at what I did and I was in the top 5 or winning medals. But I never really had this thing where I'm going to beat you. I was always like, I'm going to get the best out of myself. And so I was never gaga about like pro cyclists or whatever, because I've been there. Right. So I know what goes on. I respect them like crazy because I know what the sacrifices are like. I also think it's really selfish. Because if you're a pro athlete or an elite athlete, you put a lot of things to one side in your life to be able to pursue and reach that pinnacle of your sport. And I had this like interesting sort of phase in my life where I was like, I really don't know if this is me being the best person that I can be, because I was never really, a lot of times I wasn't there for other people because I was so focused on me and my performance and my sports. So yes, I loved working in the sort of, race scene a little bit. It was really cool to go to all the races, but I really didn't care. Like, I'd rather have been out like climbing up mountains than I would have been at the sidelines cheering people on. So the transition to work for Komoot has been amazing because I naturally love to explore on my bike, or on foot. So I love to go up into the reeks and try different routes or run up mountains. I really enjoy hill running as well. I love to try new places for, just exploring on my bike. even the other day, I was driving out to Rathmore to get the my van, put it through that roadworthiness test. And I saw like a turn off to this lake called Shrone Lake. And I was like, I've never been up there. I've never been up around like the Paps or like explored on my mountain bike up around Glenflesk. And then I took out Komoot when I was waiting for my car to go through the tests. And I did made a little plot of a route up there on the mountain bike, or it could be done on the gravel bike as well, I suppose. And I was like, right, that's where I know I'm going to have to get myself out to there now at the weekend. I'm going to head out there on Saturday or Sunday. And just
Saturday will be awful.
Well, it's Sunday, so, and I'm just gonna. I love that. I love going to places that I don't know what to expect apart from what Komoot tells me, which is pretty handy. So I know how much gravel there will be and how much single track, and then I can just follow the route on my app or my Garmin or my Wahoo or whatever, and that's what I love to do.
Well, before we go to Komoot, so you are ex-professional athlete.
Yeah.
Are you missing the adrenaline, the rush, the everything that goes into that?
I reflected on this like literally 2 days ago when I came across like an old racing picture of myself. It definitely took some effort on my side to accept, to move away from it, to accept that it is okay not to like beast myself 4 or 5 times a week, to accept the fact that your body changes, or I miss the intensity sometimes. I miss maybe being at the top condition, you know. But there's a time and a place for everything, and I think if you're really fixated on that, it's not sustainable. You can't be like that all your life. I'm going to be 40 in May. I think it's a pretty good time to like. I love the fact that I don't have any pressure to perform. I mean, the biggest pressure I have is keeping up with my friends this summer when I go. I'm going to be living on the west coast of France for a while, probably be riding a lot in the Pyrenees. And I'm going to be riding out with some friends of mine who are in pretty good shape. And I'd say the most effort I'll be putting in my cycling over the next few months is just being able to keep up with them when we ride together. But I don't care anymore about QOMs. I mean, I've been there, done that. Like, I did the whole Strava buzz. I had like the QMs in quite a lot of the Swiss Alps. Yeah.
You're done with it.
No, I enjoy surfing now. It was one of the big reasons I came back to Kerry.
Oh.
It's lovely to have the flexibility to just say, to look at the forecast and just go, right, waves are looking good on Wednesday. I'm going to wrap up work early at 3:00 and drive back to Inchreeks or to Brandon Bay or Waterville.
I think that's, again, like I said that many times, that, you know, the opportunities for the outdoors in Ireland and in Kerry is amazing.
Yeah, it is like, but I remember like when I came back and I was surfing, one of the things Ireland's amazing for surfing, especially Kerry. It's very fickle. Like, you have to be on it when there's surf, but there's never anyone in the water. I mean, the most crowded Inch has been was on a super big day. It was really nice and beautiful and clean, and there were like 11 people, and the wave can take that. But I was out last Thursday evening and it was absolutely like top conditions, and there were 5 of us. Waves for everyone. Like, having just come back from Morocco, where when the tide was out in that particular spot that I was surfing at for about a week, there could be 70 people in the water.
Yeah. Oh, I heard stories from surfers they surfing in Hawaii where, you know, everybody's looking at each other. It's like, my wave. Like, it's like, well, that's not healthy. That's not.
It was like we were watching it from the balcony in Morocco. Me and my neighbours in the hotel that I was staying in. And it was like a circus because people were dropping in on each other left, right and centre. And the vibe was pretty chill, so there was no like major fights or anything, but it was pure mayhem. Like, whereas here, like, you know, I have friends that come surfing in Ireland and they're like, this is the real deal. Like, this is what surfing was like 30 years ago, where like you go out, you paddle out into the break, and like people are like, hey, how's it going? Like, and they were taking turns. Like, so I have like these friends from the Basque Country that were surfing up in Sligo. They're pretty good surfers, big wave surfers, and they were like, oh my god, like, this is amazing. This is like heaven on earth for surfers, because as the sport has grown so popular, the spots are super crowded. So Ireland's like a mecca, except for the problem that it gets a bit cold.
Well, I was gonna say that there's the one small drawback. You don't get hot.
It'll never be very
like...
crowded.
That's it. So it's like idea, go do your favorite sport in a sucky place. It's not gonna be crowded.
Totally. If you can put up with the cold and the freezing spray in your face in Ireland.
But it's actually not that cold once you get into the water, right?
I've never been cold. I've got a 6mm wetsuit and I know people laugh at me and they're like 6mm, whatever. But it's just super cool to sit out on the board and like at sunset and Inch. Can you imagine it? You're looking down at the Ivor Peninsula and you've got this cliff behind you and it's like, or even Brandon. I mean, these spots are magic.
Listen, I totally get it because I feel like nothing is like, for me, nothing is ruining like a good outdoors experience, whether it's, cycling or fishing or what have you. When you go there and there's like a crowd of people.
Yeah.
And I often go outdoors just to get away, kind of relax and be with the nature. And now you're going into there's the other people and this guy is, doing something and these guys have music on. It's like, oh, thanks.
It becomes competitive, which is one of the things I kind of don't. Well, no, it's okay. I do like to ride down trails. I was gonna say that, but take it back. I still like to ride fast. Okay.
Listen, so before we wrap up, can you say a few more words about Komoot? I look it up, and so this is essentially the main focus is to plan routes. So that's it. So that's what distinguish Komoot from Strava. That's what distinguish it from Garmin Connect. Garmin Connect is kind of like everything. They try like everything.
So Komoot is a route planning and navigation app. You can download it from iTunes or the Google Play Store. You can plot routes and get really detailed information about what to expect on route from way surface type, like the road surface type or the trail surface type. So that's really cool for mountain bikers. And it just tells you how long it will take you to ride that route, depending on your fitness level. And
do you have a maps
profile.
like a publicly available, or is it like a specific
proprietary? It's all based on OpenStreetMap.
Okay.
Yeah. So
and there's information about the surface and all that in there.
Yeah.
Oh.
Now the amount of accurate information will depend on how accurate the data is in OpenStreetMap, but it's quite interesting. The community in Ireland is quite active on OpenStreetMap, the OpenStreetMap community, so they're constantly updating or providing OSM with information. The routing is it's good in Ireland. It's not fantastic like I think it is in maybe Germany, Austria, Switzerland, and the UK as well. It's a bit better. But we're getting there, and it's just super useful for people that are like ride leaders. So if you're with a club in Ireland and you want to organize a ride, you can plot the ride on Komoot. You share the link with your club riders or with your friends. They all have it, and then you can sync it straight to your Garmin or to your Wahoo or whatever device you're using. And on top of that, what makes us really different is the community sharing information with each other. So as a user, when you finish your ride, you'll be prompted to create like a highlight, which is taking a picture from one that you might have taken on your ride, and then creating a little pin on the map with information about that particular place you were at. So it could be a cafe, or it could be a beautiful viewpoint, or it could be the top of a mountain. And you can then write about this, and then other people, when they go to plan in that area, they'll see your little highlight. They'll see all these red dots, and they can click on those and get information about the area that they're going to be plotting a route in, so that they can do that more accurately.
And is there also like, that the road was flooded or there's an accident, like kind of more kind of type of,
so the highlights are like
warn
permanent.
People what so but
you could say for a trail, for example, we see it a lot in Europe, like by the way, this trail is going to be closed from like October until March because of snowfall, or like a flood probably wouldn't be that relevant because it would have to be like more of a permanent piece of information. But for example, please ask the farmer for permission before going on this trail, just to be polite, or be aware that dogs aren't allowed on this trail, or for example, sometimes there could be fallen trees across the trail, so just keep an eye
And
out
is
for
it
them.
is it limited to trails and roads, or is it like also when you're going like into the wilderness and just
Yeah, because we have off-grid routing as well.
okay?
So you don't have to even have like a pre-existing sort of data of trail or road network. You can basically draw a line from A to B if you know that like you want to go across that bog.
Well, you see, this is a story I probably already told on a podcast when I was trying to go up the mountains, like here, Sleepy Mish Mountains.
Yeah.
And I downloaded on my Garmin, I downloaded a trail from the website is Hill Walking or
.ie
Mountain View or
yeah.
something like
Mountain
that.
View, yeah. That's a nice
There's a
one.
lot of people uploading their trails, and so I uploaded trails. Oh, great, right? And I'm going like on the trail, and then it kind of goes up, and I'm like, okay, where's that trail?
Oh, no, yeah.
And it took me like a while, like going back and forth. I'm missing something. Like, no, you're not missing something. There's no trail. Just your waypoints are like there.
Yeah, exactly.
You gotta go. I was like, okay.
I used Komoot I did the Carrauntoohil hill run last summer, and it was hilarious. We were coming off the ridge, and like when you're running downhill, you're obviously like bombing it, like you're going as fast as you can. And there was a couple of guys in front of me, and I was like, right, I'll just follow them, whatever. And they went the wrong direction, and we ended up coming across a wall. And it was misty. It was really misty. I didn't know that ascent and descent like super well. I mean, I'd normally go up. I mean, I've been up at walking, but when you're in race mode, you're like, okay, just follow the lead or whatever. And we're going downhill anyway, so, you know, it's going to be good. Not. And then we realized, oh man, we're after going off course. And at the time, I could still see the leader. I was in second place. And I'd won that race the last time I did it. And I was like, oh my God, this is bad. Like, I'm definitely not going to win now because like she's gone. Can't see her anymore. And then I was like, but where's third place? I just can't lose third place. So I remembered really quickly.
Competitive aspect, huh?
Yeah, totally non-competitive, of course. Well, I was in second place. I just didn't want to lose it. And then I realised that I'd plotted the route already on Komoot, and I had my phone in my bag because you were required to carry your phone. So I whipped out the phone, and as I was running, I pulled up the route and I pressed navigate because I knew Komoot would route me back on track. And by that time, the 5 guys that I was running with, they could hear the turn-by-turn voice navigation as well, which was saying the trail is 50 metres to your left. And so we were all running together going down the hill, and the guys were like, what's that voice? Like, where are you getting this from? And I was like, that's Komoot in my pocket. They came up to me afterwards and they bought me a few drinks as well. And I was like, it was actually it was really good, like, to just have that, just actually in that type of situation, to be able to press like navigate or record on the phone, and then it was routing me back onto the trail that I had lost.
Yeah.
Other than that, we would have been like, yeah, we probably would have lost another 5 minutes looking for the trail.
And so it also allows you to analyze your track and see where you're going and kind of plan that trip that you're.
Yeah,
and this is global, I presume. It's not only these couple of countries. You can think about Australia or United States.
Yeah,
whatever.
it's global.
It's global.
You can navigate offline as well. So you're basically turning your phone into a GPS device. You can you plot your route. It's there on your profile, whether you do it on your desktop, on your computer, or in the app itself. Click save, and then when you're ready to go, press record. And then with turn-by-turn voice navigation, like you would have on a TomTom or on a Garmin in a car, you can follow the trail that you plotted.
And do you think you guys gonna get into the like hardware side of it? Because it seems like. I know
like what you said with Garmin, who are like maybe trying to do too many things. We're specialists in the route stuff.
Yeah, but what I'm thinking is like I know that you have an app in IQ Connect IQ store, so you can have Komoot on your Garmin device. The reason I'm saying about that is like when you're out in the wilderness, your phone is not exactly the greatest type of hardware to have that software. So I'm thinking about, device like these Garmin Montana or type of outdoorsy big screen things. And then it seems like it will be just a killer to have a app like Komoot on the kind of outdoorsy rugged device rather than on the phone.
So what we have a lot is athletes that are undertaking massive, like, expeditions on bikes normally, going across like Kyrgyzstan or Mongolia or doing around the world like record breaking attempts. They tend to use their phone as a backup, but they would use another device with enough memory to store all the data on the device, and then battery backups. If you're going out into the wilderness and you don't have 3G, and this is why we still offer you the offline solution.
I think it's a no-brainer.
So you can put your phone into airplane mode, and you still have GPS coverage generally, no matter where you are, unless you're in the Arctic Circle.
I think that the great friend of our podcast, Thomas McIntyre, who is cycling through the Africa, is using Komoot as well.
Oh, Max Sayer, he's using Komoot. Yeah, I gave him a voucher.
Yeah. I think he's one of the people who requested you being on the podcast. I might be wrong on that, but he was at least one of the.
Yeah, no, I've seen his updates. It's pretty cool.
It's absolutely crazy what he's doing.
Yeah, he's got a nice little adventure. Yeah, good for him. It's like we work with a lot of people like him who are really like these are the kind of characters that I really enjoy working with, like supporting people like guys and girls that have like these crazy adventures. They have this idea to do something crazy, and you're like, you could do with a route planning and navigation app. So if anyone has some crazy adventures and maybe a little bit of a following on Instagram or social media, then you can get in touch with me.
On Instagram, there's a guy, one-legged bike packer.
Oh, yeah?
He's a guy who was cycling through Africa to go fishing in the Sahara Desert.
Have a look.
Yeah. So he's going to be on the podcast. I definitely let him know. Oh, he's going to be listening to that episode. So
yeah,
I think here's another adventurer for Komoot.
Yeah, you could do with it.
Listen, Fiola, we're gonna wrap up soon. There's so many things that we never got a chance to get into it. Like for example, you're bike packing through Iceland.
Mostly the Hebrides, Faroes, Iceland.
Just very shortly, like how was that? Like what made you to go on that?
I wrote a blog on this for Café du Cycliste. They're a bike cycling apparel brand. And I think it sums it up quite nicely, because I realised that all of my serious bike packing adventures have been in places that are pretty much in the Arctic Circle. And I was wondering why I chose to go places like that instead of warm places like Croatia or Macedonia or something like this. And I think it's because I was just always really fascinated about how people live in those places. I think when I decided to move back to Kerry, I was also a bit worried about not having loads of people around me that are into the same thing. And then I've ended up finding myself going to even more remote places and cycling through crazy landscapes and being absolutely fine with it.
Was it a solo trip, or you had
always with friends? Yeah. Okay. So I did a really cool trip where we jumped around the Hebrides by ferry, and then we camped on the Isle of Jura and other places. And then the one in Iceland was with two friends of mine. That was hilarious. We did a 10-day trip. Oh my God, the weather in the Faroes and Iceland, it's really tough if you're going by bike. Just because we had in Iceland probably 2 or 3 days of nice weather, clear skies where you could see everything. And then a lot of the other days, we had one day where we were just staying in the tents because it was pouring rain all day. And this was in August. Yeah, and it was the same in the Faroes. We had a 3-day, it was an Expedition 3 trip that's sponsored by 3T and Patagonia. And we were doing this, we wanted to do gravel, but there isn't a lot of gravel trails in the Faroes, so it was primarily on road. But we wanted to link up all of the main sites. So we covered quite a big distance, but we were assisted by ferry and car. Okay. We did some homestays, which is amazing. If anyone's going to the Faroes, definitely look up the option to stay with families there, because you can they'll cook you dinner at night and then breakfast in the morning, and you can really see how they live, because you can either stay with them or just do the dinner and breakfast thing. Yeah. That's a really cool way to get to know the local culture. And we saw whale killing as well, which I'm not a fan of that. But we got pretty close to the culture. It's pretty hardcore. Faroes, absolutely amazing, but they live a hard life out there. But it's beautiful. And then Iceland was the same, a little bit friendlier, because I think they they can see the connection with Ireland as well. Apparently we've got some, yeah, Vikings taking Irish women and settling Iceland and the monks and that whole thing. So they were like, "You're Irish."
Great. Fiola, do you
Yeah.
have any concluders for our listeners?
No, I suppose just give Komoot a go, really, if you're interested in the outdoors and you feel like a little bit of exploring, or the security and confidence of an app there to help you to not get lost. Check out Komoot. And if anyone wants to get in touch with me on any of the topics that we talked about, my email address again is fiola@komoot.com.
Yeah, we're going to put that all over the show notes. And Fiola, you're an amazing person. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thanks.